we are not meant to do this on our own. We're meant to do this in a village. But instead, what often happens in our society is that we are left literally holding the baby on our own. And so we have to make a really hard decision between my need for a little bit of peace and a little bit of water. And it's often an unwinnable scenario. So we just go without. We go without one or the other all the time as mothers, because we're not meant to do this on our own. And too many of us are doing it on our own.
Yeah. Gosh, that really, I don't know why that's just made me really emotional. So hello and welcome to the Mama Circle podcast with me, Nat. I'm really excited because I've got my first ever guest on the show, and I really wanted a guest for this topic, which is mum rage and anger, because it is so layered and goes so deep that I wanted to basically unpack it with someone who knows it intimately. So I'm joined today by Dr. Jenny Turner. She's a clinical psychologist, originally from Australia, now based in Ripon in North Yorkshire. She's got 15 plus years of experience of working in clinical psychology. She's worked in the NHS and now has a private practice. And her passion is supporting mums with the feelings that society tells us we're not supposed to feel, but of course we feel them anyway. So things like anger, rage, ambivalence, envy, grief. And this is a really rich conversation. So I've split it into two parts. The first part of the conversation is really about what is mum rage? Why does it happen? Where does it come from? What are some of the triggers? And what are some of the things that rage is trying to tell us in terms of unmet needs that we're experiencing? The unmet needs that Jenny spoke about were not the things that came to my mind straight away. And they actually really touched me, and I got quite emotional when we got to that part of the conversation. Part two is really getting into the nuts and bolts of how to deal with mum rage, how to deal with it in the moment, how to convey what's happening with your child or with your family in a way that is not scary, and how to help them learn how to handle their own big emotions, their own anger, so that they can grow up understanding that anger is okay and it can be expressed in a way that's safe and maybe even useful. So I really hope that you're going to enjoy this conversation. And just to add as well, that if you are experiencing these feelings of rage or anger and you don't have a group or a network of safe people that you can share it with, do check out my Mama Circles. I hold them here in person in Ulm or Neu-Ulm in southern Germany, and also online. So head over to my website, nataliekmartin.com. You can find all the information there, or you can take a look in the show notes. Everything will be listed there for you. And of course, all of Jenny's information will be there for you as well. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to the Mama Circle podcast with me, your host, Natalie K. Martin, but please call me Nat. This podcast is here to help you navigate the roller coaster that is motherhood, whether you've just given birth for the first time or if you're already deep into the thick of it. I'm going to share practical tools and tips for empowerment so you can regain your energy, enjoy your role as a mama, and feel good again. You'll also hear real stories, maybe a few tears, but hopefully a lot of laughter. So whether you are joining me on your 2 a.m. night feed, cooking dinner for your family, or if you're out and about running errands, I want to take this moment to remind you that you are doing big and important work. And in case nobody has already told you today, you've got this. This is a space for you to feel seen, heard, and supported. So if you're ready, then let's jump in. I've got Dr. Jenny Turner, who was put in touch with me through a mutual contact, the lovely Sophie Jane Hardy from Red School. I'm really excited for this because rage and anger is something that I've shared already on previous episodes that I am dealing with, and I know that I'm definitely not alone with it. So welcome, Jenny, to the podcast.
Thank you. So exciting to be here.
Yeah. So before we get into things, can you maybe just give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are and perhaps a little bit about your motherhood journey? Like, how have you landed where you are?
Yeah, sure. So I am a clinical psychologist, and I was before I became a mother. So I've been a clinical psychologist for between 10 and 15 years now, and worked primarily in the NHS, child mental health or child physical health, psychological services. And so I would work a lot with mums because it was the mums who would bring the child to the appointment more often than not. I've always loved working with mums. And then I became a mother myself in 2020 during the pandemic. I was 40 years old, becoming a mum for the first time. And I was really shocked that despite all of my knowledge, all of my work with mums, I was blindsided by how hard this transition is to becoming a mother. And in particular, I think rage has been a theme, definitely, for me. And I've been so grateful for all that I know from my career that I could use to try to make sense of this experience for me. And yeah, I was just so mindful of, I shouldn't be feeling this feeling. This should be a wondrous, happy, beautiful, joyful time. What's wrong with me that I'm feeling this? So, and I think that's become really key to the work that I do since becoming a mother, is I've realized all the different layers of feelings that we are just not supposed to have as mothers, and yet we have anyway. And so what happens is we have them silently and secretly, and we don't talk about them openly, and we just feel deep, deep shame. We think we're the only people experiencing them. And so I've become really passionate about supporting mums with those feelings that we're just not supposed to have, and increasing compassion, increasing our understanding of where they come from, why they've come up in motherhood, and how very normal and human they are.
I really love that, because in every mama circle that I've held so far, rage and anger has been a topic, and it's usually followed by a lot of shame, and also this feeling of I thought it was only me, which I find so strange, because I feel like this shadow side of the emotions that can come up in motherhood are reasonably spoken about on social media. So I know that for me, having those feelings, it was a surprise that they were there, but it wasn't a surprise that they were happening. And so for me, it's always fascinating to hear people just being completely blindsided by it and not even knowing that it's a thing, let alone then having to deal with the shame of, well, I shouldn't feel like this because my child or my children are, my world, or maybe I've had a really long journey to become a mother, etc. Before we started recording, you said that you don't really like the term mum rage, and I would love to hear why. And I would like to get clear in my head, because I do call it mum rage just because that's what I've called it. Yeah. But for me personally, whenever I've heard about rage and anger, it's usually about postnatal depression, which I've understood to be the new period of you being a mum. And I'm 17 months in now, and rage and anger is something that was relatively new for me. I felt like the first 7 or 8 months were kind of like, I've got this, it's so easy. And then as soon as he started moving and becoming independent, it was like, what? So first of all, why don't you like the term mum rage? And second, is there a difference between postnatal depression and the hormones that are settling and the new rage that might appear once your baby is getting a little bit older?
Okay. Shall I start with why I don't like the term mum rage?
Whichever one you want to start with.
Well, I actually have mixed feelings about the term mum rage, because I think you're right that particularly in the social media realm, this term has exploded. And what that means is more people know that rage as a mother is normal. And that is a good thing, 100%. And it's where I've had a great deal of my support from. Like, if not for social media, I think I would have felt far more alone. It's because I think it is in our social media spheres becoming more talked about, but less so at the school gates in our families. So I don't think it's entirely a bad thing, but there's something about the way it sounds to me like other terms that we use in our language that feel dismissive of what something's really about. So the other term that always comes to mind is man flu. So
I thought you were going to say mom brain, but yeah, no.
Well, yeah, that's another one. Yeah. That is absolutely, that's another one that comes to mind. But when we think about what man flu is, it is a man becoming unwell. And because our society doesn't allow for vulnerability in men, when that man expresses vulnerability at that time, we have to mock it by calling it man flu, to put him back in his, oh, come on, you're better than this. You don't really need to slow down because you've got the flu type box. And I think a similar thing might be happening with mum rage and mum brain as well. So rather than when a man is sick with flu and we say, wow, you're sick, that's hard, have a rest. we mock it instead. And I'm worried that the language around mum rage, particularly when it's used with a bit of a jokey tone, I think that's quite dismissive. Can be, not always. Sometimes it opens conversation, that's great, but it can be verging on dismissive of A, how painful that is, and B, that it's not because I'm a mum that I have rage. It's not some flaw of motherhood. It's just rage. It's human rage. And the societal expectations on women are unrealistic, and that is what causes us to feel rage towards the world, towards the systems. And I think there's a lot of power that can come from owning that. And the more we use it flippantly as mum rage, the more we joke about it, I think we're diluting that power and potentially losing that power. And similarly with mum brain, there's so much research to say now that mum brain is about us upgrading our brain, that our brain is going through huge structural neurological changes to increase our capacity for empathy, attunement, connection. And therefore, some of our lesser used parts of our brain need to go offline. And yet we mock it instead of celebrating it, saying, wow, isn't that amazing that a woman's brain is doing that when she becomes a mother? It becomes a sort of way to make light of it, which I think is just such a shame. I think we're losing so much when we call it that. So I tend to call it rage. If anything, I think maternal rage feels a little bit less jokey, because there is something specific to rage in the context of being a mother. But I just think our language about it is really important, and how seriously we're taking it when we talk about it.
Yeah. As you were speaking about the man flu part, I was like, oh, yeah, that's so true. It's like, come on, I had the same thing a week ago and I'm alive and well, and you're hanging off the sofa dead. And yeah, you're right. It's very dismissive, and it's basically telling someone to just get over it. And as you were saying that, it was like, oh wow, yeah, mum rage. It's this terrible thing that's happening to me, as opposed to it being something useful and essentially a superpower, which I do want to circle back to. But before we do that, the second part of that question, is there a difference between rage at the very beginning of having a baby as opposed to later? And do we need to be worried in the same way if rage comes up later, that we are now being taught to be more aware of what happens if we're feeling this kind of rage early on?
I think there's the difference in the context. Interestingly, I had a similar experience to yourself in that I did not experience rage until my son was about 18 months old. I did experience a lot of other things early on. I had birth and breastfeeding trauma and worked through that. And I had a lot of big feelings and I had a lot of exhaustion. But the rage felt something different. And interestingly, for my clients, it tends to be coming out later rather than earlier. And that is interesting. I think that does link to something you were saying about it's when our child becomes independent and suddenly they are more vocal with their needs. They are more challenging of us in the care that we're trying to provide them. And I think that is a big part of it. But of course, if and where there is rage very early in motherhood, that is equally valid. I think we need to be, I don't know that worried is necessarily the term. I don't want people hearing this to think, oh my goodness, I've had that, I'm really worried. But I think we need to be taking it seriously, that there are needs that we have that are going unmet. And whether that is in early motherhood or years down the line, at each stage it is valid and understandable. It needs to be heard and listened to and explored in that specific context.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I'm really lucky that I actually started therapy when Jackson was probably about 8-9 weeks old. And so it's been really helpful to be in that therapy setting and unpacking all the things of motherhood. But still, it was a real what is happening? Why am I now so angry and finding it so hard, literally almost from one day to the next? And I really love your approach, because you look at this rage coming from unmet needs. For me, that really pivotal moment when I stood in my kitchen and I just screamed I cannot take this anymore. It was burning point, but it was actually nothing to do with my child at that moment. I mean, he was crying and had been extremely whiny, and the dog was stressed and under my feet. I'm trying to cook dinner, and it was a very stressful moment. But actually what was behind it was feeling a deep sense of disconnect with my business and feeling unsatisfied and worried about what am I going to do now? Like, my menstrual cycle awareness practice feels really far away, and I don't feel like I'm speaking to the right people. And it was about me. It wasn't actually about my child. And of course, there were other unmet needs as well. But I do like this approach of it being, it's not necessarily anything about you or your child. It's about something being missing or in lack. And I'm curious, how did you get to have that viewpoint?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I think it's important to note that I had some therapy in my late 20s to early 30s, long before I became a mum. And I would say, more than my experience as a clinical psychologist working with mums, that my experience of my own therapy has helped me navigate this. And a massive part of that therapy was learning that my emotions are not bad, that my emotions do not necessarily mean I'm on the wrong life path, or that I've done something wrong, or that I am wrong. That emotions are a natural part of being human, and can, in fact, not only just be part and parcel of being human, but can have really important messages for us about what is working and what is not working in our lives. And so that's really informed my work with people since having that experience of my own therapy. And so that's where I've always come from, long before my focus was mums and any rage experience they might have. It's your emotions are okay. There's nothing wrong with you for having them, whatever they are. And your emotions are understandable as long as we can dig enough to find the reason. It might not be obvious why you have that rage, but there is a reason. And if we don't know it yet, it's because we don't know it yet. It's not because there isn't one and it's just you. It's no, there are lots of other reasons.
Yeah.
And I think also specifically, just before I became a mother, I traveled to the US and trained with Brené Brown's company to learn her shame resilience model. And that as well has been absolutely life-changing for me. And I learned that shame is that feeling that tells us it's just me, there's something wrong with me, I am bad. And so when I experienced all these really difficult feelings in motherhood, it isn't necessarily that I'd learned about them from working with mothers. It was that I learned about my emotions through my own therapeutic journeys. And then when I had them, I applied the same ideas. Okay, Jenny, this is hard, but you're okay. This is understandable. We just need to work out where it's coming from. And through the Brené Brown training, I was alerted to Harriet Lerner's work. And she has a brilliant book called, I believe it's called The Dance of Anger. And chapter 1, anger is about unmet need, particularly for women. So yeah, that's sort of my journey to coming to this place of believing that if we have anger, if we have rage, if it's exploding out of us, then it is a really big signal from our body that we have needs, we have human needs that are going unmet. And it's essentially our body saying that's enough. You need to get these needs met now. It's time.
Something that tends to come up in the mum circles is there's like a specific moment or specific moments where things happen, we lose our temper, and then there's that shameful feeling, or there's a feeling of I really scared myself or I scared my child. I'm curious how it was for you with your knowledge. Were you able to see it happening, or was it also like where'd that come from?
Both and, I think. It's a great question, actually. I always try to, for myself, try to think, okay, why might I be feeling this? And so I was very aware that COVID was a very particular environment within which to have a baby, bring a baby into the world. I was very aware that my nervous system was on high alert most of the time. And so that will create a level of chronic stress that will send me into fight or flight. Because that's another way of thinking about anger, that it is a sign of unmet need, yes, and also that it's a sign we're in fight mode, that we're in sympathetic activation, which can be caused by chronic stress. So I was sort of aware of that. And also we moved house from Kent in the UK up to North Yorkshire. So it's like 200 and something miles, I think. And it was a very, very stressful process. And I could not believe how stressful it was, how vulnerable you feel when you're in this chain, and it could fall apart at any moment, and you may have somewhere to live in the next 2 weeks or you may not. And it was incredibly stressful. And I do remember a moment when on the day we were moving, it finally all got sorted and we were packing, And I just screamed. We should have been in the truck an hour and a half earlier, and we still had boxes to pack, and I just lost it. I screamed, and my in-laws were there, and I remember feeling, I have never let anyone see me that angry before. And almost because of the day that we were having, because we were driving 200 something miles with all of our belongings, I almost didn't have time for shame, which I think was quite helpful. I was like, right, that happened. Get in the car. Let's go. But that does stick in my mind as one of those moments that there was like no filter on me. And one time I remember I was outside with my son, and he was toddling towards a bit where there were loads of spiders in the backyard. And I said, darling, I don't want you going there. Please come back. And he, bless him, being the toddler he was, just ignored me. And I must have said it 3 or 4 times. And then I just screamed at him, and I picked him up, and I was more rough with him than I normally be and that I would ever ideally like to be. And I pulled him, and I knew that part of me was doing it out of protection of him. And at the same time, it didn't feel in that moment like a very loving act. It felt like over here now. And that was a real eye-opening day for me.
Yeah.
And it really shocked me as to how, and I'm obviously underplaying it now because it's so long ago and I can't remember the intensity of it. And also probably because I still have some shame about the actual sort of experience of it. But yeah, that was a real sort of eye-opening shock. Oh my goodness. Like I knew I had anger, but I didn't know I had this deep volcanic rage that came out at that time.
Yeah, I think that is such a good word, this volcanic rage, because even if you're someone who, like me, who really finds it difficult to express anger normally, we know what anger feels like still. I'm angry about this thing, but it is, at least what I've experienced, it is like something so very deeply internal that it's shocking. I mean, there's been a couple of times where, it's that kind of situation where you have a toddler who just doesn't listen, or they're crying for what appears to be no reason. They obviously have their reason. And there is just such a rage that can come up. And I remember thinking, like, I really understand why someone might shake their child really hard. I mean, I would never do it. I'm from a generation where there was this huge court case about a baby that was shaken by the nanny. And I can't remember exactly if the nanny got found guilty of it or not, but this baby boy died. And so I've always known, like, shaking a child is really dangerous. And I know that it's nothing that I would do, but having this feeling inside of just like, oh, will you just stop or listen? And it is like this extreme volcano. And something that I remember learning in my feminine embodiment training was that anger is not actually an emotion. It's a mask of many different emotions. It is that feeling of being in a pressure cooker. And the anger is like what's being released. It's the lava that's coming out, but there's all this stuff underneath. So yeah, the volcanic thing is a very good visual.
Yeah, absolutely. Very often when I work with mums around rage, actually the work we end up doing is around grief or trauma. It could be around birth trauma or breastfeeding trauma. It could be around early childhood trauma that they didn't know was there until they had a child of their own. That's really common. And yeah, I do think that volcano analogy is really helpful because our society tells us in a million different ways that we shouldn't feel our feelings. But as humans, we have them anyway. So what do we do with them? We stuff them inside. We push them down. And we hope on some level that we will therefore not have them anymore. But that's not how human bodies work. Human bodies have emotion. And so they just get stored within us. And this is where I think the unmet needs comes in. When we are incredibly resourced with support and nutrition and sleep and all of that, we can, to a degree, keep those feelings locked inside. But when those resources get depleted, because it takes a huge amount of energy actually to keep those emotions inside. And that's when we get depleted, which we so often do as mothers. And that, again, is no failing of us. That is to do with the societal expectations on mothers that are incredibly unrealistic. And there's such lacking support for new mothers then we run out of resource to hold down those emotions, and they spew out of us in this very volcanic way.
So we've mentioned unmet needs a few times now. What do you define as unmet needs that might contribute to feelings like this?
So it's really quite basic. So when I think about unmet needs, I think about what are our needs as human beings. As human beings, we have a need for a certain amount of sleep every day, and that goes out the window when you become a mother.
Already losing.
Yeah, absolutely. And even that shocked me, And even now, my son is 4 and he was up at 3 o'clock in the morning for an hour last night. So it's insane how little sleep I've had in the last 5 years. Also a human need that we have is enough water, we need to drink water. And again, it shocked me how often I was aware that I felt thirsty as a new mum, but I had a sleeping baby on me who didn't sleep. So when he was asleep, I wanted him to stay asleep, and my water bottle was just out of reach.
Why
and
does
so
that
I would
happen?
just go.
Why does that? I remember it so often. Okay, sitting down, finally getting ready to breastfeed, and now I'm thirsty, and my water bottle's in the kitchen, or it's on the other side of it. Why does...
I mean, a simple answer is that we are not meant to do this on our own. We're meant to do this in a village where whoever holds the baby has other people around them that can bring them water. That, that person should just be saying, I'm thirsty, and they should be brought water. That is how humans have evolved, to be in villages that support each other in these times. But instead, what often happens in our society these days is that we are left literally holding the baby on our own. And so if our water is out of reach, we have to make a really hard decision between, I have a need for water, and if I get up to get it, to meet my need, then I may be compromising my baby's need for sleep because he may wake up now, which then impacts on my need for peace as well. So now I'm weighing up my need for a little bit of peace and a little bit of water. And it's often an unwinnable scenario. So we just go without. We go without one or the other all the time as mothers, because we're not meant to do this on our own. And too many of us are doing it on our own.
Yeah. Gosh, that really... I don't know why that's just made me really emotional.
Oh, yeah.
I did not expect that.
Yeah.
I think, I remember in the beginning, oh gosh, my boyfriend is self-employed, so I've been really lucky that he's been around a lot. And he would bring a water, bring a tea, bring some snacks. And then when he would have to go out to work or he wouldn't be around the house, just there is that moment of like, oh God, I've done everything. I've remembered to go for a pee so that I'm not breastfeeding with a full bladder. I'm, all the rest of it. And now there is this water over there. And there is that moment of just like, oh, I just will leave it. I don't know why that made me emotional. Gosh.
I think it's understandable. I think there's that weighing up of my needs versus my child's needs right now. And that's a really painful place for mothers, that it just doesn't get talked about enough.
And I think because, as you said, like it is, water and sleep. We're not talking about like, I need to go and have a day at the spa. Like, I think it's maybe because it is we're talking about the most basic level of needs that are not being met because so many of us are at home, maybe with no partner. Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe you don't have any family around, and there is such a basic need.
The thing with the water as well, and the sleep to a degree, is that we think, it's okay, I can get some later. It's okay, I might sleep better tomorrow. It's okay, I'll grab that water this afternoon. And so that's where it is like a drip, drip, drip of unmet need, actually. If we just stop drinking water for 2 days, our bodies would let us know. But we have moments to have just enough water to keep us going, but it's not enough to nourish us, to replenish us, to give us our full strength. And so it happens slowly over time that these unmet needs get bigger and bigger and bigger. Another really important factor that most of us, I would argue, are malnourished at this time of life. We may be on our own, and even if we're not, it's because, like you, my partner was present for quite a lot of the postpartum time. But It's still, even with two of you with a newborn, when you've not done it before, it's still incredibly hard and stressful. And so we did rely on highly processed foods to chuck in the oven or chuck in the microwave because that was what we could manage at the time. And it's only now, 4 years later, that I'm beginning to do a bit more research into that area and discover the impact that that sort of food has on my immunity and nervous system. And I think we also just in our society are often not getting proper nourishment and nutrition.
Yeah, and something that I've spoken to before briefly on my social media is once your baby's born, there is such an awareness of you need to have healthy food and all the rest of it. And so for me, before I gave birth, I batch cooked the heck out of meat and bone broth and all the rest of it. And I'm really lucky that I had some friends here, you know, who came over with food and did this kind of meal train thing. But I feel like it just is so concentrated in that immediate postnatal period. And actually what we need, I feel, is as part of that village, our friends and extended family who will still do the meal train thing, especially once the kids start moving, because you have even less time than before. So we might spend a long time thinking about, what do I put in my child's lunchbox? And then for me, I'll just have a cheese sandwich or something.
Exactly. And I think, again, like I want to be careful to not put more pressure on mums here and be like, well, you should be cooking healthy meals for yourself and for the family. Because actually I'm talking more to the societal ways that we think about food and nutrition, and the fact that it is cheaper and easier to buy the unhealthy food than it is to buy organic food, for example, or cook from scratch. It is just, and then again, it comes back to that village of how are you going to hold the baby and cook a meal? Actually, you should be either holding the baby and having someone else cook a meal, or vice versa. You know, it is true that we need more than we can get, and it should not be on our shoulders alone to meet our needs.
100% agree. Even just the price of a bag of carrots as opposed to a bag of chicken nuggets. It's so crazy to me. So we've got sleep, thirst, food, nutrition. Are there any other unmet needs that we might not necessarily think about that might be contributing to feeling this way?
I think a really big one is being our authentic selves, which sounds sometimes like it's just this fluffy new age idea of, yay, for us, we're so evolved, we can be our authentic selves and transcend into this amazing version of ourselves. But actually, it's so fundamental that there's a misunderstanding about what it means to be in our authenticity, I think. It's not just a nice to have once everything else is met. It's fundamental to our well-being to be able to be ourselves and accepted and loved for who we are. And this can sometimes link to our own childhood and our own upbringing. Again, I'm not looking to blame any particular individuals or parents, but there's a societal ethos, or certainly has been. I think that it's starting to shift now. But there has been a societal ethos of keep calm, carry on. We suck up our feelings, we push them down. Children should be seen and not heard. And children should be compliant, and they should be good kids and well-mannered, and they shouldn't have big feelings. And so I think a lot of us in our generation have been parented with that, with our parents that had the absolute best intentions, loved us to bits. And we haven't been taught how to live in our emotions and own our emotions and be who we are in our full expression of ourselves from very young, actually. And I do think this is a really particular challenge for mums of our generation, because now the amount of information there is out there in books and podcasts, etc., about how to raise your child so that they are emotionally well and emotionally whole and maintain their authenticity throughout their life. So we're reading all that, soaking it up and going, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I'm going to try and raise my child like this. And then what is happening on a deeply unconscious level is it is challenging all of that. I think I would say trauma, because it is a trauma to become disconnected from your authentic self. And I mean a trauma in terms of not a conscious, wow, that was traumatic, but like literally our body holds dysregulation around these moments where our authenticity had to be separated from us so that we could be compliant, for example, growing up. And so we are then in this really complex place as parents of trying to provide something for our children, and our body is recognizing on a really deep unconscious level, we didn't get this. And that is then triggering all of that trauma to come up. And then we are experiencing some of it like dysregulation and, you know, these fleeting moments of anger, but we're just pushing it down because that's what we've been told. And at the same time, we're pushing it down for ourselves. We're encouraging our children to have all their big feelings and all of that. So there's a real juxtaposition, a real sort of paradox of modern day parenting, I think. So I think that's a huge unmet need, and one we've been carrying for our whole lives without realizing it often.
Whew. So that's the end of part 1 of this amazing conversation about mom rage with Dr. Jenny Turner. I invite you to hop into episode 2, where we will chat about how to deal with rage in the moment, how to unpack it, not just with ourselves, but with our children, and get more support. So I'll see you over there.